From dainty and elegant to whimsical and fun, heirloom sewing is truly sewing joy. And oh, how many ways we have of expressing that joy in what we sew. With just a little decorative stitching, a lace insert becomes something too sweet for words. Hand embroidery becomes pure art with just the right twist of the thread. The creative turn of a piece of trim makes it blossom into a delightful embellishment. How blessed I am to be a part of your sewing joy and to have you as a part of mine. Thank you for joining me in my sewing room today. We will have a lot of fun. Many years ago, when I first started sewing heirloom clothes, little motifs were available. Some of them were French, which had a netting background. Some of them were Swiss, which they were embroidered. And they're really not available anymore. However, guess what? You can do it on your sewing machine, make those beautiful little motifs. This little dress is so sweet, simple and cool for summer. It has the little wing needle entredeaux around the edge of the arm's eye and the neck. This is what I really want to show you though, these sweet motifs that you can make with your sewing machine and just a straight stitch on the netting part. Do you see the little oval motifs? All right, first of all, they're trimmed with the little wing needle entredeaux, and there's a little bit of magic in how to do this, and then sweet little flowers. Let's just find out the magic. Using an English netting, you prepare the netting by spray starching it and shrinking a little bit, and then a water-soluble stabilizer. You do have to have stabilizer behind the English netting. Now this is just straight stitching, a decorative stitching, up and down to texturize this. Now the little motifs are now ready to be made. It's nice to use a piece of stabilizer to actually, you see the point of that is so you can zigzag or applique stitch and it will be straight. The next step of this little oval motif is to add the end parts which make it into an oval. All right, we're going to then zigzag or applique stitch all around the outside. As you can see, we're going to have to remove the stabilizer sooner or later, but then the little flowers are stitched on, and then it's time to cut it out and to use it on your dress. I'm so happy to have as my guest today my friend Rlarry Touchette. Rlarry is an education consultant for Baby Lock USA. Rlarry, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Martha.
It's such a sweet little dress. I can't wait to see your technique.
Thank you. What we start with is starched English netting, and I like to double starch or triple starch my English netting, let it thoroughly dry between each starching. I don't like to iron it with a steam iron after it's been starched. I like to use a little bit of a mist of a starch on the top of it to loosen it, to get the wrinkles out. If you steam it, the starch begins to release and you lose the actual stiffness of the fabric. This is what I call texturizing. I use a decorative stitch to disguise that it's just English netting. I want it to look like a little bit more. I want the eye to look at more. I want the eye to look at the threads more than anything else.
It looks like lace when you do that too.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stitch a little bit of the background stitch, which I've set up on the machine. And I like it to be as wide as possible. And I like this to stitch at a relatively fast speed because I'm always in a hurry to get it done.
I know. Oh, well, as much traveling as you're doing is little time. And this is a stitch that's called a smocking stitch, but couldn't you use really any stitch?
Yes, you can. Just try to keep it very, very open.
Okay.
Because you can see, we want to see the actual netting underneath it, but we just want to disguise that it's netting.
Okay, I got you.
The reason I've gone to using this iron-on release stabilizer is that I'm not always very good at drawing lines and making each piece look fairly symmetrical. So I've learned to draw the piece out and then make the shapes as simple as possible. I started with a rectangle. I did my satin stitch on the edge of the stabilizer. I added 2 more pieces of the stabilizer to give me my round corners, and then stitched around it and removed the stabilizer because this is a release stabilizer, and embroidered my little flowers onto the English netting.
And then let me put this beautiful dress over there again. Then how did you get it attached to the dress?
What I do is I zigzag it on with a very loose zigzag. When I say loose, I want maybe a 1.8 stitch length and maybe a 2 millimeter wide stitch with a light thread. And after I've zigzagged around it, then I cut away all of the fabric that's behind it so it's open. I do not rinse out the piece of the little applique until after I have it stitched onto the dress, so that it has the stiffness to it. And then after it's washed out, it becomes very, very soft.
And you put one more little flower right above that.
That's just to tie it in with the dress, so
I
it looks
thought
like it was made for the dress.
Well, it was made for the dress. Rlarry, thank you so much. And now Rlarry has some sewing inspirations to share with you. Rlarry, you have made some of the most beautiful linens here. I just can't wait for our viewers to see it. Now, this is a purchased.
Yes, it is, Martha.
And you've done the lace shaping, the lace-shaped heart with your wing needle entredeaux, and then done your machine embroidery right on top of that.
People don't realize that you can lace shape and then embroider on top of it just to add one more dimension to it.
Just like you did with hand embroidery. Put a lace shape. That is beautiful. And this one, oh my goodness, with the edging as well as this beautiful motif in the middle. That is absolutely beautiful.
And that is an embroidery design that stitches out only thread, is what you see. It stitches...
Only thread.
It's only thread on water dissolving mesh.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, cut work. You know how I love cut work. Oh,
so do I.
So, you know, Rlarry, one thing I love was you had used a purchased. Now, I know that you stitched each one of these out, but this would be beautiful on the purchased.
Yes.
On the purchased
and with that lace, what I try to tell people is I buy what I call ugly lace. I get it.
You mean these things?
This right here. This is ugly lace. Okay. But then we cut it all up and sew it back together.
Okay. I like the rayon laces.
Right.
And it's very, very beautiful. This is a true masterpiece. And this was done in machine embroidery. Is that correct?
That's in machine embroidery with a heavyweight thread. It was stitched out on English netting.
Thread. Okay, on English netting. And I think you said the secret to this heavyweight thread, like a cotton thread.
It's a cotton thread, and it has a lot of length that it makes, and you have to keep the machine meticulously clean. I stopped it 3 and 4 times in each design.
Because it looks like the padded satin stitch. Truly, I didn't realize that any machine would do that. Okay, now real quickly, let's show them these 2 darling dresses.
All right.
So cute, and you did your motifs down here.
Right here.
And the motifs here, and little happy skirt. Here's what you stitched all those and made your decorative fabric, and then the Madeira on the bottom, and a sweet little slip. Oh my goodness, with more Madeira. This is what you call beautiful details.
I love little girls' dresses because they let you express so much.
You know something? That's what I love about little girls sewing. You really can express. And look how much fun. I'm going to show you a little secret. Look here, when we lift it up, there's more machine embroidery on the petticoat. Well, actually on the underdress, and then look, all of this beautiful work.
This is actually 6 yards.
6 yards.
6 yards
in the slip?
In the slip, and 30 yards of your lace edge on it.
Wow. Well, these are adorable. And now Rlarry has a So Quick, So Easy project to share with you. Rlarry, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous placemat. Tell us what you did. Beautiful.
This is a pre-hemmed placemat. It's well starched, and I've cut out a section of this and put my organdy in it, and then I've cut up a lace motif. It starts like this, and I cut everything apart because lace is a complete stitch, and we can cut it apart and sew it on. When I made this, we start with, again, using this release stabilizer. This is a heat release stabilizer. So I can get my design, and all my designs can be the same because this can be reused. I straight stitch around it, and then I do a applique stitch around it. And I'm stitching my organdy to my linen. I'm going to cut them apart so I can get my hole in this. I take a 4mm wide satin stitch and stitch around this. There's no need to put any type of stabilizer onto this because this is heavily starched. I've cut up my design and I have put it on with pins right here so you can see what it looks like, and it gives me the actual shape. I will free motion zigzag these on. When I say free motion zigzag, you do it by moving the fabric without the feed dogs with this, using a zigzag stitch, and it will catch all the way around to make it flat. So what I'm going to show you...
I love what you've done here, what you're getting ready to show.
What I'm going to show you here is the hole that goes around the edge. Since it doesn't have to attach to anything, I take the finger and I take it down to 0.
Like the pin stitch is what you're using.
Pin stitch,
the one that
yes.
has a straight and little fingers.
The one that Martha dances to.
I love the pin stitch, yeah.
And what this does,
and you've
it
taken
allows
the
us to go forward
to
and backwards on this. And what happens if I go slow, it has an extra beat in the hole, and that extra beat actually makes the hole larger. So you can see what happens here. I get the hole, and I don't have the crossover stitch that would leave a mark in my satin stitch.
That is a beautiful way to use the pin stitch. And I think you said that this basically takes you how long to do the whole thing?
This I can do in about 30 minutes.
Including the pin stitch all the way around?
Including the pin stitch.
Including the flattened pin stitch all the way around. This is truly beautiful. Using your pre-purchased, your purchased placemat, you can make some beautiful gifts, wedding gifts or placemats for your home.
Anniversary gifts. Shows the beauty of the table that's underneath it, and it's just elegant.
Well, it is elegant. I love all the things you brought, Larry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here.
And now we have a section called And Sew On. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today Kari Mecca. Kari is the owner and designer of Carry Me Away. She's the author of 4 books, a frequent contributor to So Beautiful magazine, and a teacher at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion. Kari, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
What are you going to show today?
Pom-pom daisies.
And oh, so cute.
They're made from spaghetti bias. The ones you're pointing at are made from an 1/8 inch, and I'm going to show you how to make the 1/4 inch ones.
How darling. Pom-pom daisies.
Okay. I've got a flower making stick here, and I've got my my spaghetti bias, and it actually even says start here. So guess what? We're going to start here, and we're just going to take a little piece of masking tape. And I just have regular masking tape, but you could use a low tack tape, and they have all different kinds on the market. Just something that's not too sticky. And actually what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap our trim around the stick. Now, I don't want you to wrap the trim. See how messy that gets? I want you to just hold it out, and I want you to just twist your stick in your hand. Now I'm leaving a little space between, but we're going to scooch them up and smooth them out. Now the spaghetti is cut on the bias, right? So don't stretch because you won't be able to get it off the stick very easily. But we'll go ahead and wind that on. Now I didn't use a particular length. I'm just I'm winging it. We're going to set that down, and we're going to just get our little roll of masking tape. And we're going to tape across to hold the wraps because we're going to take the stick out. So we're going to put a piece of tape, put it on straight 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to flip our stick over, and we'll put another piece of tape 1/4 inch from the same side. So if I put it on this side, I flip my stick over, so we're going to put it on this side. Now we need to take it off the stick so we can stitch it. So let's just pull that first piece loose, and then we're just going to slide it right off the stick. Now this first one's coming loose, but that's okay. It's not important. We're going to set that back down, and I'm actually going to label A and B on each side. So we'll just take a marker, A, B, we're done, but I have a sample over here, so we'll just move on. Now, I've got a needle and thread. I'm ready to go. Here's our taped bits, and I'm actually going to cut right along the fold on one edge. Can you see that?
One edge only, okay.
One edge only,
Okay.
because we want a loop. We don't want fringe, but
Okay.
you know, we could try it sometime. Next show. Okay, we're going to take our needle and thread, and we're just going to sew through one layer of spaghetti right at the end, stitching away from our bundle of wraps. Then we'll flip it over, and then we'll stitch through the other side. Now, we've put it 1/4 inch from the edge. We've measured. Take a second and measure, because then we'll have an even edge when we stitch. And I'm actually, while my needle is in the fabric, I'm going to go ahead and just pull. I've taped this very well. We're going to pull it out, but I happen to have a few already stitched and pulled out. But you'll just continue stitching and
Individually then, one at
Yes.
a time. Okay.
How many ever petals you'd like? About 8 to 10 make a real pretty daisy. And let me show you what I've got for you. So here they are, 8 to 10. And now we're going to use both ends of the thread. So we're going to pull up the knot end and the needle end of the thread, and we're going to tie this into a circle. So just simply tie, and we want it nice and snug. Use a strong thread, doubled, waxed. I actually use a beading thread that's very strong so that this won't come undone, because it is important that it's nice and tight. So you really want to tug on it, and you end up with all your ends here. So from there, we're going to do the chenilling, the center part, to make our fluffy pom-pom center. So we have our chenille brush, and you want a plastic bristle brush, okay, nice and stiff. Kitchen brushes, even things like that work, but we're going to go ahead and just hold our raw edges, and we're just going to brush to fluff. Can you see that? Makes a bit of a mess, but in the end, you'll end up with just a real fuzzy little knot at the top, like this, and then you just take your pair of scissors and you can trim it into a nice round little dot. So I have a couple of samples here done in plaid. There's gingham. You can do the solids, anything you want. You could do every other petal a different color. It'd be darling. If you sew just one petal, it becomes the bud to a flower. So there's so much you can do with it.
Kari, that is fascinating. The brush makes the pom-pom wow.
That's right.
And now thank you, Kari. And now I have some hand embroidery to share with you. I am so pleased to have my friend Wendy Schoen with me today. Wendy is the designer of Petite Pochette patterns. She's the author of 5 books, a regular contributor to So Beautiful magazine, and a teacher at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion in Huntsville. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Martha. I came with this little garment today, and if you look right around the circular part of the design, you'll see a little open area. That stitch is called point turc, or fill turc, or 3-sided stitch, whichever one you choose, it's still the same. So let me show you how it works. Now, it's a little complicated, so I'm going to go over the steps several times until you get it. All right, so I'm going to begin with a waist knot, and I don't usually use a knot to start the stitch, but I just wanted to show you how I would normally just come back, and working over the thread tail, you'll secure it. So really, there's no specific tie-on method. I'm going to sew on the diagonal from the bottom edge to the upper edge, and if you notice, I've drawn lines here. Normally, I would not have lines, but this is to help you see exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to sew an upward stitch. Now, I'm going to repeat the stitch in the same exact places. Now, the next stitch is going to be at the bottom across. Now, there's no A, B, C rhythm. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to say horizontal and vertical, okay? So when I do a horizontal stitch, I'm stitching either on this edge or this edge. When I do a vertical stitch, I'm either stitching on this edge or this edge, okay? So I'm going to take my first horizontal stitch. Whenever you stitch a horizontal stitch, you need to repeat the stitch. So since I just stitched that once, I'm going to stitch it again. So in the same 2 places, the second stitch. Now, the next stitch is going to be at the top. This is a vertical stitch, only it's going in the opposite direction. and down. Now the next stitch is a horizontal because you always stitch 2 horizontals and 1 vertical. When you stitch 2 horizontals, you lay 1 thread, but when you stitch 1 vertical, you lay 2. That's because when you take the horizontal stitch, you lay the 2nd thread. I know, confusing, but you'll see a pattern soon emerge. All right, now remember that was a horizontal stitch, so I need to repeat it. Whenever you have a horizontal stitch, you stitch it again. So 2 horizontals. Now the next stitch is going to be a vertical. 1 vertical, and now I'm going to take the horizontal on the lower edge. Notice what happens when I take the horizontal stitch, I lay the 2nd thread. So we wind up with 1 thread on each side of the horizontal edges and double on the inside edge. Okay, now why are we doing this? Well, this is a pulled thread stitch. So a pulled thread stitch is where you stitch in the fabric in a pattern and it creates an open area by the fact that you're pulling the threads together or bundling them together. Now I'm not actually pulling because I wanted you to see the pattern. So let me just stitch for a few minutes and you'll kind of see what I'm doing, I hope. Like I said, once you get your rhythm, it's not as difficult as it seems now, but if you start working it, by the time you get about maybe 10 rotations on the stitch, you should have it in your head. So whenever you do a horizontal, you stitch it again. Now, another way to tell where you need to put the next stitch, because it does get a little confusing, is you know that you can't stitch in an opening where the thread is emerging. So you know it has to be someplace else. You don't have very many choices. So you know that you want a vertical stitch. So therefore, that's the only option. So now, remember, if you're pulling these tightly together, you're not going to see threads. You're going to see holes. So my suggestion is to get the rhythm or the motion down before you start pulling the thread, because once you start pulling, you cannot count threads any longer. I'm going to show you what it looks like a little bit closer. Now this is actually the pattern, and then to tie off on this, you're going to bring it to the back, and then remember, these are all going to be tied very tightly. You're just going to slide this beneath, and that's going to be the end of that.
Wendy, thank you so very much for all of your wonderful techniques that you bring to my sewing room.
You're welcome.
And now I would like to share a piece from my vintage collection with you. There is a sewing detail on this dress that I absolutely love, and I think you might like to use this sometime. Do you see how it gives the appearance, this pretty little collar, that this is a round yoke dress? That's a trick. It's not a round yoke dress at all. It's a dropped square yoke dress, which really are much easier to make than round, with this pretty little collar that comes around, giving the effect of a round yoke dress. Sweet little long sleeves and a very simple and yet beautiful skirt with the lace and the Swiss insertion, the lace, the Swiss insertion, and a little ruffle. And you know, I really like this detail too. The little ruffle, rather than just having lace on the bottom, has a piece of lace insertion, about an inch up from the bottom. Let me turn it around, let you see the back, which is so pretty, with little buttons and buttonholes. You can see the little collar comes all the way around, and the back is just has a couple of pieces of insertion. Come on down and let's look at one more detail here. This lace has been overlapped. This lady had only a straight stitch sewing machine, which of course all ladies back then only had that, but the lace has been overlapped. And with the Swiss insertion, the overlapped lace, and then there's a tiny little tuck at the bottom. I'm not sure exactly how she did that, to tell you the truth. And then all of the laces have been overlapped, including the gathered lace on the bottom. Thank you for joining me today. Won't you come back next time?